Y'all ready?
Fish Stripes live off-season edition. Another one, a very special time in Marlins history right now. A very special guest joining us for his second appearance on Fish Stripes Live. Peter Pratt just celebrated a birthday yesterday, I believe. How was it turning 23, man?
23. I'll take it. It was good. What a day. I was sat there sipping whiskeys. And next thing is Craig Mish, notifications are on. It's that time of the year, isn't it? You have to have them on. Craig Mish pumping out there. Sandy's going to be signing an extension. I was like, oh, my days. Another whiskey, please, senor. So what a birthday. What a present. The 22nd of November. I mean, he didn't sign it on the day, so I guess we didn't get the actual signature. But I think it'll go down in Marlins history this day. Like, what a deal. I know we're going to get into it, but yeah, great birthday. Not a bad hangover today either. So that was a bonus.
All right, glad to hear it, man. As usual, we're joined by the usual suspects: Kevin Burrell, Noah Berger, Eli Sussman, Daniel Rodriguez, and obviously we're going to start off with the news of the week, which is promises to be Sandy Alcantara signs a 5-year, $55 million contract extension with Miami. According to Craig Mish, it should be official within the next few days, if not early next week. Eli, I'll start with you here. This was, we've been talking about this stream after stream after stream. Finally, it comes to fruition here. Sandy will be pitching in Miami for at least the next few years. What does it mean to the team and to the player as well?
Before we get into that, I do have one surprise for Peter that I want to get into just here off the top before I forget, as you already mentioned.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday.
Peter. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personalized it for you and everything.
Is that you singing?
Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. I am a professional media person, very versatile. You wouldn't know it from listening to these shows. But this news, outstanding. I mean, one of the few deals of this magnitude, because it is ultimately a big investment from the team, $55+ million, territory they have not gone anywhere close to since the ownership change, that whenever you make a big decision like this, you expect there to be two sides to every argument. You expect there to be at least one, even if it's a small minority, a vocal minority that finds some fault in the decision. And this was just a rare exception to that, especially when it's a pitcher, knowing how inherently risky pitchers are, how more difficult they are to project moving forward. Like, it just speaks to how unique Sandy is and how ideal the timing was to do this, that the way it's been received has been so positive. I like it even more from the team's perspective than from Sandy's. I think that Sandy, if you really thought this a little more, maybe higher value towards the end of this deal, and we'll have to see exactly how it is divided up. I think he could have gotten a longer deal if he really pushed for it, but he is really towing that line between getting that security while also being eligible to jump into the free agent market when he's going to be at age 31, which could potentially still be like right in the heart of his prime. It was just an awesome move. And I think you just give them bonus credit for getting it done before the work stoppage, before the possible lockout that's coming next week, at a time when obviously there hasn't been much going on this offseason. If you want the fan base to be enthusiastic about the future, especially compared to last year when it was so quiet, you need to do something like this. And they realized that, and they got it done just in time.
Yeah, no, I think this is finally some news that we can all objectively say it's fantastic to hear. We've been waiting for this for a very long time. And to me, this kind of sort of reminds me of the Christian Yelich extension when he was here, a 7-year, $47 million contract it was. This one, a little more money, a little less years. Daniel, I'll go to you here. Just your thoughts on for the team perspective and the player as well, and Sandy's staying here for the next 5 years.
For the team, I love it. You get the best pitcher on the team for it. When you look at other pitchers and what they're getting, you see Sandy, 5 years, $55 million. That's almost nothing for the Marlins. Sandy probably could have gone double, maybe even triple down in the open market. And if you really pushed hard for it, and it kind of looks like the way that kind of baseball is going, where these really great young players are getting really smaller contracts, with the exception of the big news from today. We look at Ozzy Albies and Ronald Acuna, and then you also look now at Ron DeFranco kind of shows what the Marlins could maybe not have gotten. Maybe Sandy would have pushed for a little bit, but I love it for the Marlins. This is really great. It also shows maybe hopefully later on in the offseason they can get maybe a little more free agent signings, save some money. But this is really great. If they had a great, this is an A++. They pass it with flying colors. Give them the extra credit. This is just amazing for Kim Mang and Derek Jeter.
The
Yeah,
Marlins got it done. I mean, it's a great day. Yesterday, when I got the news, I was in school, and obviously I'm not gonna go crazy in there, but I got some service, and because service in school is really bad, and I got my reaction through Twitter. But yeah, man, Sandy's back, and when you saw the Barrios extension, I think for a second, at least me, I got a little bit, in a way, I was like, oh damn, this guy got 7 years, $130 million. Although, in my opinion, it's a little bit of an overpay for a guy like Barrios. Still, then you start to think if Sandy's going to ask for more, but at the end of the day, they came back to that 5 years, $55 million, which we had heard Craig report a while back before I think the season ended that was the proposed offer, and he came pretty close, although he still hasn't signed it. It should happen in a couple days, as Isaac had mentioned. Sandy's the ace, man. It makes sense to bring him back. This is the best move they've made so far. It's a move they had to make. If they didn't make it, there were going to be issues in that front office, and I feel like it would have gone really downhill after that. So I'm glad Sandy's back, and he's going to pitch in Miami for 5 more years, and we could say that now confidently in a way that we don't have to really get scared about him not going to another team or getting traded.
Yeah, and you mentioned Barrios. I would arguably say that Sandy is a much better pitcher, in my opinion, than Barrios. Barrios has had one really good year, and just what an overpay for that Barrios got. Alex, you just joined us. We're joined here by Alex Carver. What were your initial reactions when you see that Sandy Alcantara is finalizing an extension to stay in Miami for the next 5 years?
No, fantastic. I mean, we've been talking about it, during the season, and while this, we talked with Craig about it. He kind of told us that nothing's really happening, and then it came together. I think pretty quickly. We heard a little while back that there was nothing. I think when we had him on the show, we asked him, is that going to happen this offseason? He goes, there's nothing happening right now. And now here we are on November 23rd, and it's done, pretty much done. Well, not official, I guess, yet, but looking that way, right? So, yeah, I mean, fantastic. I mean, and I was just listening to Eli's pod with Aram, and some great points brought up. I mean, basically what Aram said is exactly what I think. I think everybody on the show can agree that, if these prospects stick around with how good the Marlins are at developing pitching, hitting is another story, but with how good they are with developing pitching, some of these guys, maybe not all of them, but some of these guys that the Marlins have, if they stick in the organization, are going to turn into quality pitchers. But with Sandy, you know it. You know what you got. He never gets hurt. He's out there throwing 200 innings. I mean, striking out over 200 guys. I mean, it's Cy Young stuff. It's ridiculous. And then just the intangibles, right? I mean, Aram mentioned this too. I think Eli, you did too, that you're not going to find a guy like that can go from this pitcher that's really struggled with his control, really struggled with his stuff, didn't really have a third pitch. And basically a year and a half later, he's blowing guys away with 3 pitches. So fantastic. I mean, Sandy's the man. He wants to be here. It's clear that he wants to be here. You buy out the arbitration years, you save money there, because as the years go on, the more expensive a player gets. So they did it at the right time. You can liken it to Carlos Martinez. I think that's probably your most comparable contract. But I think Sandy is a better pitcher than Carlos Martinez. So yeah, you get a Cy Young candidate for $55 million, $11 million AAV, maybe, obviously different if it's backloaded, which we're expecting, but still, I mean, great move, great day for the Marlins. The question is, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, how do you construct the rest of the offseason now that you have that money spent, and where do you go to address multiple other needs? So I guess that's another conversation, but in terms of Sandy, great.
Yeah, Peter, Alex mentioned it. Now that you have, your ace locked up, you can, in pen, right? Trevor Rogers will be right behind him. How do you construct the rest of the rotation now? You have Sandy there as number 1, pitching on opening day for the next 5 seasons. You're going to have Trevor Rogers there. Now it gets a little fishy. Do the Marlins feel like the energy to maybe just trade a Pablo Lopez or an Eliezer Hernandez? How do you see the next 3 spots of that rotation lining up?
It's tricky. Pablo's name is coming up a little bit too often for my liking, if I'm honest. The strength of this team right now is the pitching. And the problem is, if we move away some pitching to go and get some offense, well, next thing is pitching drops back into the middle of the pack as well. Next thing is you've got a vanilla looking roster. So I want to take Pablo Lopez's name out of everyone's mouths, put it to the side and go, listen, Sandy, Pablo, Trevor, the question, and this is the main question pitching wise, is what the hell's happening with Sixto? Is Sixto ever going to come back and be the Sixto we saw in 2020? If he does, sensational. Plus, you got Eddie ready to rock and roll. Luzardo, wait and see what happens there. I think the name we mentioned, like the most obvious name that maybe doesn't fit in longer term, is Eliezer. If you want to trade away from your major league levels, but listen, Eliezer's been hurt tons as well. It's not going to get you a massive haul. He's not going to be the centerpiece of a deal. So I'd like the guys to stand pat with their young, controllable arms, the major league dudes. I'd prefer to stick with them and deal from the lower levels if we need to. And I think we do need to. When I was last on this stream, I said it's going to be trade season. But,
we still had Marte.
Wow. Marte's not happening. Castellanos ain't happening. None of these dudes are happening. So if we want to upgrade, it's going to have to be trade season. But how do you get there? This is so tricky because everyone's going to be asking about Pablo. They were already asking about Sandy. Everyone was talking about Sandy. And I think that the flag has been put down now. Sandy's going nowhere. But what do they do? I mean, do you move Pablo? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't think you move Pablo. I think Pablo is a cornerstone of this rotation. I think he's made a name for himself here. He is reliable. He doesn't get injured very much. He's there when you need him. I don't think you even consider getting rid of Pablo at this point.
Yeah, we spoke about it last stream, actually, Peter. And so my thought is, and I think Christina agreed with me as well, is that now is not the time to trade Pablo. You would be selling kind of high based on performance, but he is coming off a pretty nagging injury with the shoulder. And what my idea was, I mentioned a few times now, is, hey, if you're playing really well and he's pitching really well in the first half of next year, trade him at the deadline to a team that really needs pitching, and you'll get back some solid offensive return that's major league ready. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in with how they would handle the Pablo Lopez situation, unless you want to extend the guy as well.
I think I can play like devil's advocate for you, Isaac, right? And I do agree with you, and I agree with Christina as well. Let's talk about the shoulder, right? This is his second injury with the shoulder. If he gets hurt again, the value's gone. Like, nobody's going to want him. Like, that's it. Like, if he goes down with that same shoulder injury again, and you don't trade him now, you may not get anything for him at all. So is this your last chance? Hopefully not. Let's knock on wood on this, that Pablo stays healthy. But looking at it realistically with the injury history, and it's a shoulder, and we all know how bad shoulder injuries can get and how repetitious they are throughout players' careers. We can look at many examples of that. You don't trade him now. You look back at July, he hopefully not again, but hope gets hurt again. He goes down. You get nothing, and then nobody's going to want anything to do with him. So, yeah.
And they have Max Meyer right there waiting to go to the MLB. I think, and you also have Edward Cabrera in Sixto. I don't think Sixto starts with the team. I think he'll start in AAA, get some starts over there because of that injury. Then they'll bring him up depending what happens. I do almost believe Eliezer is going to get traded. I'm almost certain about that. Pablo, I don't know. I'm iffy on it because if you trade him, that opens the spot for Max Meyer. And if you don't trade him, I think it'll happen either trade deadline, which Isaac mentioned, which makes a lot of sense right now. He's coming back from that shoulder injury, which, those are never good. He had a decent start. I think he pitched one inning that final game of the season or two. He was okay. Didn't see much of it because of such a small sample size, but maybe allow Pablo to start off the season, see how it goes. And if it's going well, Miami's a couple games over 500 or under it, and they need to make a big move to acquire either an offensive piece or a bullpen arm. You could maybe look into Pablo Lopez, but Alex does make a point. The injury is a little bit scary. And it could maybe be the final time you could trade him. Maybe a team like the Yankees, which I know I heard at least once. There will be a team maybe that trades the top 30 guy for a guy like Pablo Lopez, which honestly, a healthy Pablo Lopez is worth maybe one or two top 30 guys at most.
Yeah, both Alex and Kevin, I would say just one thing to keep in mind is that he did return. I think maybe that's why the Marlins are maybe a little bit, rushing to bring him back and make sure he had another start to end the season on a major league mound. whether that's for his own personal confidence or it's whether to show other teams that, hey, look, this guy's healthy. He's back. He ended the season healthy, technically. Daniel, I don't know. We haven't heard from you regarding Pablo Lopez, because that it really is going to be a intriguing name to follow all off season.
I think, like, with his injury, I think he's pretty injury prone, that to say the least. But I think it's time to let go of Paulo. You guys can't really, like Alex said, if he gets injured again, I think his trade value goes down. Like, if he stays, I'm with it. But if he gets traded, then I understand it. I could see it happening. I wouldn't say I'm really for it, but if it does happen, I wouldn't be surprised. It just really depends on what they could get for it. I would prefer major league ready prospects, or if not, guys who are already in the major leagues, preferably a catcher. That would be great if you can get a respectable, decent, good catcher for someone like Pablo Lopez, not Alex Jackson, please. I think that would really be great for Pablo. And plus, our rotation is ready. We could throw in someone like Max Meyer. If not, maybe we could just trade maybe Eliezer, keep Pablo, and get the same type of catcher. But if we trade Pablo, I wouldn't be mad. I would not be up in arms angry about it.
Well,
Well,
so
going
one thing I
quickly
think
back
people
to-
are like missing here is you praise Sandy so much. You
He had a
stack
better
up their
season.
numbers the last 2 seasons, Pablo against Sandy, and they're the same dude in terms of effectiveness. With Sandy, you get more durability and you deeper into his starts. You know, we agree that as the individual player overall, you trust Sandy more moving forward. His ceiling is higher because he continues to get better every single year. I mean, Pablo also makes really clever adjustments to his game, adding new pitches.
He added a changeup.
Well, he has had the changeup for a while. He added a cutter more recently. And
I'm sounding really dumb tonight.
But so Pablo is, I'm not saying, there are very particular circumstances where I'm open to the idea of him possibly going. And mentally, I'm actually sort of prepared for the possibility because, as we've mentioned at times on Fish Stripes across all platforms, is that there are 2 buckets of players. There are the players that were handpicked by this new ownership group in the last 4 years, and they're the guys that they inherited from Loria's company. And Pablo is one of the few guys still remaining from the old regime. So I'm mentally prepared for a pretty decent possibility that he does get moved. That doesn't mean I'm happy about it because he's awesome. He's awesome. And there's a reason why so many teams are curious about him.
What
And
percentage
you
would everyone
mentioned-
put
you mentioned,
on Pablo getting traded? Like, would you say 50, 40%,
25%.
90? What's the
25%.
percentage of Pablo getting traded?
25%.
I'll put it at 40%.
I'd say Eliezer has a much higher chance of getting traded than
Oh, yeah,
Pablo,
for sure.
I,
look
I, I, although I do love Eliezer, I absolutely love him. I felt terrible when he got injured running the bases. I do think Eliezer could bring back a good enough haul to justify a trade. I don't think so for Pablo. I don't think you could get a big enough haul in the current market for to justify a trade for Pablo. Someone like Pablo.
The other
Well,
thing
you're
that
gonna get a
The only
bigger
way I
chance
could see
Pablo.
Eliezer going into a trade is if you add a prospect with it. And I know Minnesota has interest, and I know I've said it many times, but it's a team that makes sense. You could get Mitch Garver, which is a proven catcher. He's on a cheap deal. Makes a lot of sense to get a guy like Garver. And I know Mish said it today on the Swings and Mishes, which I'm not going to say too much on that because I know we'll get into, I guess, some portions of that later. But you either trade Eliezer or Pablo, it makes sense at the end of the day. I think Pablo may get a bigger haul if he gets a couple games in through the season, and then you maybe decide. But with Eliezer, it's either bullpen or you trade him because he does make sense in the bullpen at the end of the day.
the only
Well,
other
That brings
thing
up
with
that brings
Pablo
up another point. That brings up another point. We only get 5 rotation guys.
Exactly.
You get 5. Where do the other ones go? Do you keep them down in the minors? Do you keep Edward Cabrera in the minors if there's 5 above him? Do you keep Sixto in the minors if there's 5 above him?
That's
Do
the
you keep
wrong
Luzardo in
mentality.
the
That's the
minors?
wrong
Or
mentality.
you put them in the bullpen?
Every team is running through 10 starters over the course of the year. Guys get hurt, and
I
the really
get
great
that, but-
teams, the best pitching staffs in the majors, year in year out, there's really 2 teams that kind of separate themselves from everybody else. It's the Dodgers and the Rays. And if you follow their teams, they constantly send up and down really good pitchers. They don't care, man. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about the fact that some of these guys are good enough to be in rotations on rebuilding teams. You know, they try to fit all these pieces together. And if you're reach a certain level of performance, then you're going to stick in the majors. But otherwise, it has to be about focusing on the 40-man roster, not the 26-man active roster. You're going to need all 40 of those guys at some point during the season.
The point I'm getting at is, do we move some of these starters to the bullpen? Do we move someone like Eliezer to the bullpen? Do we move someone like Jesus Luzardo to the bullpen? Would that be something that could benefit us long term, or even just this season?
In a way,
Well,
I see where Noah's
is
coming
not
from
yet.
in terms of. I see where Noah's coming from in terms of what's that starting rotation going to be 2022 opening day. Throughout the season, obviously they're going to use more than those 5 pitchers, but 2022 opening day, what's that starting 5 going to be? And that's I think where that conversation opens, because you have at least 10 to 15 options who could be that starter. I mean, we can name them all again. I know Ethan on one show named at least 12 or 15 of them, those options.
Right. Well, the Marlins have flexibility too, right? Because past these main 7 guys or 8 guys that we're talking about that are going to get a shot at these, I guess, last 2 rotation spots, if Pablo is still here, you have that flexibility. And as Eli just mentioned, then you have guys behind that can fill in and be part of the 40-man, like Nider, Garrett. So, I mean, there's room to move guys around. In terms of who the 5 are going to be, I mean, honestly, they're not going to give up on Jesus Luzardo. They traded Starling Marte for him. That was like their headline trade of the deadline. They're going to give him a shot, and I think he deserves a chance to stick, because when he's going good, he's really good. Edward's the same. That's a top 5 organizational prospect. They won't give up on him as a starter soon. So, I mean, honestly, I see Sixto with the injury and everything. I see him starting in AAA and then probably making it up during the season because of the time that he missed. So honestly, I think you're looking at Luzardo and Edward to start the season, and then past that, see what happens. Trades, guys get hurt. If Pablo leaves, it's a different story. But I just to bring up one other thing on Pablo before you go away from him. Eli brought up the stats. The other thing to not forget about that guy is the mindset. Like that guy's just like Sandy in terms of the numbers being like Sandy, and they are. He's just like Sandy in that he's not content. We heard him in spring training. Pete heard him. Eli, you heard him. Isaac, you probably heard him. That he's setting goals for himself. I want to throw 200 innings. I want to hit a home run. Like he's setting goals for himself and not just falling into that trap that a lot of players fall into where they say, okay, I know I can do this and I know I'm good, but I'm good where I'm at. No, he wants to get better and he's pushing himself to get better, just like Sandy. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's another aspect of Pablo that should not be discounted, is that he's not content where he is. He wants to get better. He wants to do more. And I think he will do more because he has that. You can't train a mindset like that. You either have that or you don't. So, and I think that's another intangible for Pablo that should be taken into account when you talk about potentially moving him. But yeah, I'd say 35% chance that they move him. I really don't think it will happen now. But I was just playing devil's advocate with my my injury talk.
Yeah, no,
and
that's
I
a great
think one of the
point.
big pieces of this whole rotation thing is going to be when does Sixto come back? Because I don't think he's going to be that starting guy in that rotation, 2022 opening day. I think he'll start in the minor leagues, get a couple games in there, and then they'll see. So that's also something else to think of, because if Sixto comes up and he just starts dominating, then you start to think, who's that guy who's been, not the best? And then that's where you start making those moves.
So yeah, something we have to talk about here is Sixto, and maybe not in the best way possible. Peter, I don't know if you were paying attention to Craig's replies, some sort of negativity surrounding the player, whether it's work ethic. He said, quote unquote, forget him regarding Sixto, which is very strange, considering how well he did perform in his short stint in the majors in 2020. Obviously missed all of 2021 with the surgery. It's a very strange situation with Sixto Sanchez here. I don't know if you, like I said, I don't know if you read Craig's tweets regarding that. I don't know what your thoughts are on Sixto Sanchez.
I saw. Listen, it's Craig Mish notification season, so you get it all. And he's scaled it back this off season, so there's not as much volume I have to keep up with Craig at the moment. But I saw the stuff on Sixto. Just in general, when I think back to last season, so the 2021 season, it just felt puzzling. It was just a puzzling situation with him, and no one, Craig included, I think. And I think this is all part of like the limited access that media has now and had in 2021. Couldn't quite get to the bottom of what was going on with Sixto. The messages were all mixed and no one really knew. He was throwing at 25 feet. He was throwing at 35 feet. He was throwing at 60. It was all just a bit weird. I think when we strip it back, what happened, he got hurt They covered it up. They hoped he could rehab through it. It didn't happen, and thus they had to go down the surgery route. That's kind of where it played out. For me, I'd be expecting Sixto to be a full go in 2022. Like, if the surgery was successful, we saw what we saw in 2020. For me, I think it was the Rays game, one of his first starts against the Rays. He was absolutely sensational. Absolutely sensational. I was blown away by it, to be honest with you. He was miles better than I expected. So I know what Craig's saying, and I'm concerned about the messages that are coming out, and I'm concerned about some of the stuff I see him putting out there in social media. Like Sixto, he's not thrown a pitch all year, but he's living his best life on Instagram. And for me, like, you kind of need to tone that down a little bit when I think, you're out hurting or whatever. So I think someone maybe kind of media PR needs to kind of get their arm around him and say, listen, have fun with your life and whatever, but maybe tone it down. You're a baseball player first and foremost. So, but high level, I think if he's not traded, which I'd be surprised because it's a kind of sell low situation for Sixto. For me, I see him being full go 22. And we'll look back and go, listen, 21, we'll write it off. Full go back to Sixto being what he was.
Yeah,
and you have
fair.
to also remember, Sixto pitched the playoff game. He was a big part of that playoff series against Chicago. So, and this is the only time I think I'll disagree with Craig here in terms of giving up on Sixto, because it's not time to. I mean, this could be the season where he breaks out. He's still a rookie. He could still win Rookie of the Year. That's something we have to all remember, because he never graduated from that 2020 season.
Is he really?
Yeah,
I think he's still a rookie. He pitched like 3 or 4 games, and one of those was the playoff game. So,
well, he pitched in, I think, 9 total games, including the playoffs. It's just a
wow.
technicality that keeps him eligible. One important clarification with Sixto, with him, is the surgery he had. It wasn't a full reconstructive surgery. It was an arthroscopic surgery. There was a tear in the back of his shoulder that they thought would heal, and it clearly didn't. And they cleaned it up. And the timeline of that procedure, if there's no setbacks, he should be fully healthy for spring training, not fully stretched out. See, that's the thing with him, is he's never pitched anywhere close to a full major league workload, which is what Alex is kind of alluding to, is that they either start him on the IL or they start him in the minors, where his like workload doesn't actually affect the rest of the roster. You're not going to get a full major league season out of him until 2023 at the soonest. And the thing, so, I mean, my only speculation with Craig is that he's hearing from somebody that Sixto is perhaps just not as diligent with his rehab as he should be, that perhaps there's something going on that they feel like he's not staying on schedule, or I don't know what. I think it's premature to panic, because, I mean, again, the team has not said anything, and we're not anywhere near any sort of deadline. We're 3 months away from potential full squad spring training workouts. Like, I don't think this is a conversation to have right now, but I understand why we are, because we're all so high on his potential. Me in particular, I mean, I still have him. I regard him as the best prospect in this organization. Like, his combination of not just upside, but also his floor. If he's healthy, he's going to get dudes out. He is a remarkably complete pitcher. I can't say enough good things about him on the field when he is on the field, and the things that he did show in that really limited sample that are really promising moving forward. So, I mean, there's not much that we can really say about it, just because it is so mysterious. But no doubt, it's definitely kind of a worst case scenario based on where we were at this time 1 year ago with him. That he was emerging as a year ago, he was maybe like an inch right up there on the same level as Sandy in terms of guys that we thought were critical to the future or the organization. They were held in that same type of regard, even though he hadn't achieved as much at the major league level. So, and that's just what happens with pitchers and with injuries, is it could change really fast, and it's a roller coaster of emotion. So he could still climb back up to where he used to be, but it will take some time.
I think we've gotten to the point with Sixto where it's, if he's not able to pitch well in the first half of the season, it's either shape up or ship out time. It's either you're here and ready to play, or you've got to go, because it's been enough time. This injury shouldn't be being dragged on for so long. How did we get this so wrong to begin with?
Well, I
can't blame that all on him.
I'm not blaming it on him.
I'm just saying. What I'm saying is, the guy is still 23 years old, though, right? I mean, I think the Marlins screwed up the injury. Honestly, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
He had that injury. They were still throwing him out there. We got the reports that, Pete was saying 60 feet, 75 feet, this, that, long toss, 100 feet. And he still had an underlying issue. And they knew about it, and they didn't shut him down. They still kept throwing him out. So the team screwed up. In some capacity, I'll say it flat out. Something happened with the medical staff that he was still throwing baseballs, because he should not have been throwing baseballs if he needed an arthroscopic surgery, period. And if they knew it, which apparently they did. So the thing with Craig is that the guy has a team source, right? He trusts them 100%. If the team is saying, and this is a worrisome part for me, there are people within the organization that are reporting that this guy is not going to be a major league pitcher. That's why Craig is tweeting what he's tweeting, because that's what he's hearing. So the fact that there are people within the Marlins organization that aren't in on Sixto at all, which I disagree with. I'm not as high as Eli on him, but he is still within my top 10 prospects. Anyways, There's questions to be answered. And that's why I said he won't start 2022 on the major league roster. I don't think there's a chance, period. I think he's definitely maybe at spring training in a limited capacity, throwing 1 and 2 innings at a time. And then he's going to build back up in AAA for sure. So what happens there, how he builds back from this surgery is what you have to watch. But the fact that there are people within the organization that are that far out on this guy, that's the worrisome factor. But again, you can't put it all on the player. What you can put on him is what Pete said, is that, we hear about the work ethic and stuff, and he hears that. I'm sure he hears people talking about that. But then he's going on Instagram and stuff and just posting ridiculous crap, one after the other. So it happens to young players. I saw it happen with Victor Mesa Jr., where he came up. Obviously, he's from a different country as well. He came to the United States, and he was kind of let the lights hit him a little hard. He was asking photographers to take his pictures and stuff. So it happens. But there's a time where it comes down to it that, hey, you're a professional now. You got to act like it. And that's what I think Sixto himself needs to fix first. And then the health, that's out of his control, of course, because of everything that's happened so far. But if he can fix that factor, there's still a major league ceiling. But again, the fact that there's people within the organization that are out, that worries me.
Yeah, and not only was he he's injured, he's an injured player posting all this stuff on social media. His team was also playing like garbage. So it gave, it didn't look great. And regarding, the people inside the organization are just so low on him, that's mind-boggling to me because, like Eli was saying, John Heyman reported he's one of the better pitchers in baseball when he was, playing at his height in 2020. Yeah. He was pitching playoff games. So it really is strange to me how, south this whole thing went with Sixers. But I think that went quicker than I thought. I don't think it deserved it. I know it's a very, not that sketchy of a surgery, but sketchy enough where, hey, it's going to be a while till he's pitching in the major leagues again. I would say early May, mid-May, sort of the same timeline that we had originally this year.
That's what we were saying this year. Right. We said that this year.
Exactly. But moving on to
progress. Anyways, go ahead.
Swings and Mishes had a nice little podcast this morning. I guess we'll move into that. Generally, they obviously talked about Sandy, how big of a thing that was for the team, for the player itself, life-changing money for Sandy Alcantara. One thing that Craig did mention was Toronto as a potential trade target. He seemed to be pretty low on Alejandro Kirk, the catcher for the Toronto Blue Jays, who is a bit heavy. So he didn't seem to think that this guy would go towards Miami. That would big, over 250 pounds would be a center in the NFL. Peter, I'll go to you here. He seemed to more focus on Moreno, the catching prospect stud that's in Toronto, as a potential target. I would be all over that. I see Alex, giving the thumbs up. What are your thoughts on a Toronto-Miami relationship with a trade?
I think so. The Kirk situation, he's effectively Dan Vogelbach, but a catcher, right? That's kind of what we're working with.
That's
what that says to me is Kirk probably, with that body, isn't sustainable for everyday catcher at the major league level. So I think that's kind of where Craig was going with that. And his body is what his body is. Listen, the Jays, they have some depth there. They have some high quality prospects at the catcher position. They need some arms. It feels like a good fit. It feels like there could be something there. Equally, when we're thinking about the Angels needing arms and the Marlins looking for outfielders, again, it's a good fit there. So just to go back to the Jays, though, it's possible the Moreno dude, I think, is the clear standout. I'm not convinced about Kirk. What's the price going to be? Listen, the Jays are going to be asking about Pablo Lopez coming back. We're going to go full circle on that. Pablo's going to be on the wish list, and they'll probably want one or two pieces as well, I would say, to try and get a deal done there. I don't know. It feels like they got 4 really good major league-ish ready dudes at catcher there, the Blue Jays. So they don't need 4. They need another arm, though. I'm pretty confident of that. A major league pitcher. So I think there could be some deal to be done there. But I guess again, going back to the same pod you're talking about, today's swings and misses. Mitch Garver's been touted as well. Listen, you go in, the Twins look to me to be clear sellers, and so maybe Mitch Garver becomes that dude. And again, you then keep Pablo. You move someone else to get Mitch Garver and go that direction. But Kirk, no. Moreno sounds nice. Blue Jays, I think, is a good fit for the Marlins in summary for me.
Yeah,
and
you
Craig
mentioned
was really high on Moreno. The way he talked about him, he said he's one of like those offensive firepower guys. And I know Eli's been following Moreno. I think it's Moreno who's been following from the AFL.
Yeah, no, I mean everybody is high on Moreno. He's the best catching prospect in baseball right now. He surpassed Joey Bart. Remember how horny everybody was for Joey Bart earlier this year, and Moreno is
Rushman.
He's just such a polished hitter. Like, I mean, the easiest way that you kind of want to, if you want to put a stat on developing hitters and the ones to feel most confident in, you want to look at their strikeout to walk ratio. And Wander Franco, who's in the news today, I mean, he's the guy that was like off the charts in that regard, coming up, his video game numbers coming up through the minor leagues in terms of that, just showing his immense discipline and his bat to ball skills. And Moreno is not that far away from that. He has more walks and strikeouts in his minor league career, despite only being 21. So constantly playing against older competition. He was hitting, we were hyped about what JJ Bleday was doing this fall, and Moreno was hitting just as well as he was until the very end. He slumped like the final week. And because the sample is so small, that tanked the numbers to only look like good instead of amazing. But that's why if of all their catchers that the Blue Jays have, he's the one that the Blue Jays are least likely to move. And so it would take, that's kind of where Pablo comes in. Aram Layden in particular, he loves the idea of that blockbuster of Pablo going for Moreno and perhaps little side pieces. We're a long way away from that, but you can dream about that. Yeah. Me personally, I mean, this is just circling back to something we've discussed previously, how the Marlins need a catcher for 2022. Like right now. And instead of rolling the dice on any sort of prospect, there are plenty of veterans out there that you could potentially trade for and give up less to get than to get Moreno. So we've covered all those names before. That's still my stance for the time being as to what they should do.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. Moreno would be the target there, but unfortunately they're starving for any sort of catching. I don't think there's a worse tandem at catcher in all around Major League Baseball than what the Marlins rolled out in 2021. Peter, you mentioned, Mitch Garver, another name from Minnesota that Craig Mish mentioned a few times today on the Swings and Mishes podcast is Byron Buxton. 1 year left of control. When healthy, I would go out on a limb and say a top 10 player in Major League Baseball. Phenomenal athlete, a volatile player that has all 5 tools, had a great 2021 when healthy, obviously. What would it take to land a centerpiece, a franchise-altering player like Byron Buxton in Miami?
Problem is with Buxton, you've already hit the nail, though. You've got 1 year. It's a rental. And the Marlins aren't going to afford him. So I know he may be franchise altering for this season. But beyond that, we're going to be back to Starling Marte season. It's going to be, all we're going to hear all next year is pay Buxton. That's all the hashtag's going to be. And we won't pay him. We'll end up trading him back. For me, it just, unless this is the final centerpiece for 22, every chip is in the middle, and the Marlins go, let's have it, which I'd be shocked if they did.
Yeah,
it just doesn't feel like a fit. It's the same problem with the Contreras situation. Again, you end up paying maybe over the odds for a 1 year deal that you're never going to extend. And I know Craig again was talking about it, saying, well, maybe they can preempt an extension. Why would Buxton want to do that? Why would Buxton ever want to do that? You just go to free agency and you do, your Nick Castellanos extravaganza, who's the highest bidder? Let's roll. That's the most likely outcome there. So Buxton, for me, great dude, effectively a rental. We're not going to extend him because we can't afford him. Let's move on.
Yeah,
And he
like-
declined $80 million from the Twins. We have to keep that in mind. Multi-year offer, $80 million. So Miami would have to at least go $90 million, maybe a little more for a guy like Buxton, who hasn't been able to play over 150 games. One time he played over 100 games, and that was in 2017. He played 140. Last season, he had 61 games, and he was pretty good in those 61. I mean, he had more home runs than at least half the roster that the Marlins are running with right now. But yeah, I'm a little iffy on Buxton. I don't know. It's just a weird situation. The guy is a really good player when healthy. Isaac said it, top 10 guy when healthy. But then on the other side, the money that we're gonna have to give him, the injuries that he's most likely gonna sustain because he's an injury-prone player like Eliezer, for example. And I don't know. What would Miami have to give up? Risk Max Meyer, risk Dax Fulton for a guy who you're just gonna have for 1 year and most likely will go into free agency. Miami won't sign him. We'll have Starlin Marte, as Pete said. It's gonna be pay Buxton.
Yeah, and Craig did mention that there is a sort of situation where there could be a window of time where the team that is looking to acquire him could have a little time period where they could try and work out a contract extension. Like you said, Peter, why would Buxton do that? It seems like a pipe dream. Daniel, I'll stay with you, Daniel. Is that a trade that you can see realistically happening even without the extension?
Knowing the Marlins, I think any trade is realistically. I think they either will underpay or overpay. I don't think there's anything in the middle. It just really depends on what the Marlins want to give. I hope someone like Max Meyer, Dax Fulton, and someone like that really isn't the way to go. But I also wanted to ask: do you think is Pablo for Byron Buxton a realistic trade option you see for both teams? Is that something that the Marlins could do?
not.
Could they trade Pablo Lopez? As we mentioned, it's two guys who are injury prone. The only problem is that Byron Buxton is, like Peter said, seemingly a rental. If he didn't want $80 million from Minnesota, I don't think he's going to want $100 million from the Marlins. I think he's probably going to want a little more also.
The thing with Pablo for Buxton is Buxton, you wouldn't have anyone behind him. Pablo, you got people behind him.
No, it's a good
You've
point.
got pitchers. We don't have bats. And if
Yeah.
Buxton goes down with an injury, it's going to hurt us a lot more than Pablo going down with an injury.
Yeah, but you guys like to just throw out these pitchers' names as if pitching isn't like the most difficult thing to accumulate like the Marlins have, and you can never have enough pitching. And yes, the Marlins' strength is pitching here. However, that's not something that you just want to give up and make it a weakness. Just to have a stopgap option in Byron Buxton. Obviously, he's not technically a stopgap, but he would be a rental. So that's just a fascinating problem to have. You're right.
But yeah, that's why we say Miami. Why would you make that kind of a trade to give up the pitching that Minnesota's going to ask for? That's why I don't think you make that trade, because Minnesota's going to ask for Max Meyer. They're going to ask for Dax Fulton. Maybe they even go on a limb and ask for Yuri Perez, which I doubt. But for a 1 year guy, Miami's not going to do that in a million years. But I don't know.
Here's the question that everybody in here can be honest with themselves. And I think you guys all are on the same page with me. Are the Marlins making the playoffs in 2022 with or without Byron Buxton?
Nope.
No.
So why would they do it? Why would they give up controllable guys like Max Meyer, Pablo? Like, if or you are pretty sure at least that you have multiple other holes to fill, that's not just center field, that you're probably not going to be very much more competitive than they were this season because of how much there is to get done. Why do you trade for a 1 year player that you're 90% sure isn't going to re-sign a contract with you? Why? That makes zero sense. The only argument that you can make is that it looks good to fans, right? But when you're a baseball owner, you got to think about the fans, yes, but you also got to think about long-term sustainable success, which is what Jeter and Kim Ang have preached since they've came here, is long-term success. And you trade Byron Buxton, you're giving up a lot of your long-term projectable success. So it's the farthest thing from my mind that the Marlins will trade for this guy. I know he can be a good player. There's so much risk with his injury history. He's not going to re-sign the contract. So it's just a stupid trade. And I really, really hope that they don't do it. And I really hope that it's already like off the hot stove, because it just doesn't make sense for everything that the Marlins are trying to do.
And what does that say? What does that say about
all said together? By the way,
what does that say about how the organization feels about the current minor league outfielders that we have? If we're only going for a 1 year rental, Like,
That's true.
what about guys like JJ Bleday who absolutely raked in the Arizona Fall League? What
That
about
means nothing, Noah.
I
That means
don't want to
nothing.
hear it. I don't want to hear it.
I would go out
I
and
am
hit 4
pleading. I
homers,
will.
10
I'm
home
going to
runs
be as
in the
ignorant
AFL.
as I could possibly be on this. What about what?
They don't
I'm
matter.
gonna go back.
They don't matter.
Give
They
me a
don't
second.
matter.
If I
Let
heard
me
what
rant.
Isaac said
Okay.
correctly,
You
that
know
was
what?
hilarious.
I'm gonna go back to my back of the room feeling of what about De La Cruz,
Oh
Sanchez,
my god!
Bleday. You all hate when I do this, but it's blaring straight in our faces.
What the hell is Brian De La Cruz, guys?
Brian De
Listen,
La Cruz is
A
not the
good
answer to all the
baseball player.
Marlins questions. If the
Brian
Marlins
De La
strike
Cruz
out
is
on
a
every
good
single free
baseball
agent,
player. That's
Marte,
what we need.
Castellanos,
We're not
if they
getting
strike out on every free
Castellanos. We're
agent,
not getting Marte. We're not getting Buxton.
obviously not.
Maybe we could get Cedric Mullins. I doubt it. Who are we getting?
so I think Alex
Rafael
makes a good
Garcia.
point. Just like how realistic is it that the Marlins will compete in 2022? Craig seems to think that they are further away from competing than the team itself thinks they are, which it's scary because shit, if Miami thinks like, oh, we're ready, like they did this year, and not do much more, then like they're gonna be bad for a long time. However, I think you get someone like a Byron Buxton, it's just a very tough thing. Peter, I want to hear your thoughts. Just realistically, how many pieces are they away from being a 90-win ball club in 2021 and 2022?
There's a lot of holes to fill, isn't there? I mean, there's 2 outfielders. For me, there's
catcher.
There's 2 outfielders, a catcher. I'm high on the Jose Ramirez, the J Ram. That's me. I've said it multiple times, but you've got 2 years of control and it's relatively cheap. So I've always been high on that. The bullpen equally was just pain and leverage as well. So you probably 2 good bullpen pieces, 2 outfielders, a catcher, and probably some sort of infielder that is major league level rather than pure backup of a backup of a backup. That is kind of that was the problem. We just, 1 to 9, we were okay. But as soon as we had those injuries last year, if we remember, they all came in a bunch. And boy, oh boy, we were in serious trouble for long periods.
And I said this at the start of the year when all the injuries were coming in. If that team was healthy throughout most of the season, that would have been at least a 500 team. When all these teams like the Mets, the Phillies, the Nationals, I'm missing another team for sure. The Braves were struggling. Miami could have taken that number 1 seed easily if they were all healthy. And I think that all started with the Marte and Eliezer injuries. I know it sounds weird now saying it because of how bad the Marlins were this season.
Kevin, you're never all healthy, and that has to be what you take into account. That's what the front office needs to take into account when putting together this team. Because if they were all healthy,
90% of them
there
were
interesting possibilities. But the problem was that, and something that we complained about on a bunch of these streams, is how just unprepared they were on the rest of their 40-man roster. That like all the depth pieces, when Brian Anderson goes down,
you have no one.
Who the hell is playing third base? And they chose the worst possible players. They chose Isan Diaz, and they chose Devin Marrero, and they chose remember Luis Marte? Luis Marte got called up because they had nobody else. So last year, it was frustrating. That's the one. It's like a one little thing that doesn't even cost a ton of money. If you're talking about things that they could do better this year, that actually are realistic, that they don't have to worry about making any big risks in any individual players. It's focusing, more on getting the right guys on minor league deals or even on really cheap 1-year deals and being able to manage that aspect. And that's something that you're not focused on right now. Right now, everybody's focused on the big names. They're going to be focused on Marte until he's officially off the board, and then on Castellanos until he's officially off the board. That's the way that the mind works, and the front office should aim high. If they do strike out on just a ton of those guys and they don't get the fair trade values that they want, there are a lot of things that need to be done this offseason to make sure to give that big rebound that we're looking for. It is unusual for a team to lose 95 games 1 year and then make the postseason the next year. There's a whole lot that needs to go right in terms of acquiring new players. And also just a lot of it is trusting the guys they have internally. There are some really special talents that we've seen at the major league level this past year, and guys that we're going to be seeing for the first time next year that are legitimate difference makers potentially if things go right. So there's a lot of factors that will have to come together. It's not crazy to think that they could be a contending team it's just, yeah, it's, you can't plan on that. You shouldn't set the expectation at that level yet.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Eli makes a
thing-
great point. Go ahead, Alex.
The thing that you have to hope, that I hope, and I'm sure we all hope, is that they don't fall into the same trap. You talk about Craig saying that they think they're closer than they really are, which, coming from him, I believe it. You hope they don't fall into the same trap as the old regime. I'm sure everybody in here remembers 2016, before Jose Fernandez passed away, and they were saying we're 2 starting pitchers away. I'm sure you guys all remember that. I mean, you had Adeiny Hechavarria starting
You
at
have to
shortstop.
remind us.
You had Martin Prado at third base, and yes, he had a good year in 2016. But those are on a good team. Those, even, in those days, were bench players. And talk about that team's bench, as Eli alluded to, with creating a bench. That bench was probably one of the worst in team history. Well, outside of this season, that was one of the worst benches in history.
Yeah.
So it's not just all about your starters. It's not just all about 26 guys. It's about constructing the team around 26 guys that can still contribute to winning games. This year, they didn't do it. They're potentially letting people walk that can do that and can provide that more in comparison to the guys that they did have here, which we just mentioned. So you need to be able to put 40 guys together that you are sure can win games. And that, of course, goes into the starters, but it goes into the bench as well. So that's something that's always been a problem here. It was a problem then. Obviously Jose passed away, unfortunately, and the team went in a different direction. But now apparently they're planning on being competitive again, and the 40-man roster is still shit. So, that's what you got to look at and say, you need to know how to construct a team. And above all, you have to be honest with yourself about how close you are to actually being competitive, because I don't think it's that close.
Yeah, and Alex, you mentioned the fact that they are, possibly allowing other teams to get some of these guys that you mentioned, like a Bryson Brigman, like a Griffin Conine, like a Tommy Eva, like a Jeffrey Yan, a Colton Hawk. Oh, Peter, I really want to get your opinion on this. Griffin Conine was left unprotected in the Rule 5 draft for some bizarre reason. I know some people just say, it's not a big deal. Team, there's such a small percentage chance that someone picks him up. I think that you don't even take that chance. There's so much dead weight on the 40-man that you could have risked pulling away a Nissan Diaz or Jorge Alfaro, because you're going to non-tender them anyway. Well, Alfaro's case, what was the reasoning in not protecting a guy who, he might strike out 75% of the time, but he could also maybe hit 35 home runs? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was a topic that me and Sean got into last night on Fish Across the Pond, and we spent a good amount of time in this area. I was like you, Isaac, where I was like, why take the risk? Yeah. There's guys on the 40 now, like the 40 was full, but it isn't full because there's 3-4 dudes that we know aren't going to be on the 40 soon enough. So why take the chance? Really, I look at it and think the Marlins have just taken a calculated risk that no one's going to select him because he isn't ready. He isn't. And if someone does select him, he'll probably be returned. Knowing the Marlins' luck, he'll probably be selected and he'll absolutely go bananas in the major leagues and we'll all be fuming. But I think it was a calculated risk that they've taken because they don't need to add him now. Add him next year to the 40 at some stage. They need to save some 40 spots to layer in some new talent. I think that's where I landed on it anyway, that you need some spots when you're going to add in Jose Ramirez, Nick Castellanos, Marte, etc.
Jorge Soler.
Maybe. I mean, Soler, just talking about realistic free agents, you call one up there, Noah,
I think he has
one.
I think honestly, Jorge Soler has the biggest chances of actually coming to Miami. Of all the names we've said, I don't think that we have a chance in hell we're getting Castellanos, Buxton, or any of those guys. I think the biggest chance we have is Jorge Soler. And it just became even more of a thing because Miguel Rojas just said he wants it.
Let me play it.
If I was a GM, again, today this is something that I don't know if it's gonna happen or not, but a Jorge Soler will be a really good fit in Miami. Cuban, he's living in Miami. I think he would love to play here. He got the power to leave this ballpark, so I'm not worried about him worrying about the ballpark like Adam Duvall was, Adam Doobie, he was here. He got 22 homers, but he was complaining about every ball that he hit right center because the ball didn't travel for him. And he went to Atlanta again, and he found his place. So I'm gonna pick Soler to come here for 3 years.
So
I did
Miggy
not
should
know
be the
that
GM.
about Adam
Just
Duvall.
Miggy should be Miguel Rojas should be the GM. Just let's just go with it. He should be the GM, manager, owner, coach. Let's just have Miggy do everything.
I did not
Please.
know that Adam Duvall complained that much about Logan
Yeah.
Duvall Park. I just
that
found
sounds
that
like
out.
some
Complained all the time.
Stanton and Yelich stuff. That's
It sounds
funny,
like
but-
something that Nick Castellanos did at Detroit when he was in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, look, no, before you get so excited, Jorge Soler in 140 plus games, he had a negative .2 wins above replacement.
I don't want to hear it.
Okay. So, Miguel
Will
Rojas
you
is
let
a
me
great.
be ignorant, please?
And
We will.
I think we'll wrap it up almost around here, unless anyone else has any final thoughts on Rule 5, trades, possible free
Easy.
agents.
Yeah, I'm just gonna name a couple teams: Orioles, Pirates, Diamondbacks. All teams that most likely will have some interest in Griffin Conine. Although
Yeah.
he's not ready for it, what happens if he smashes 20 homers or 20-25? You mentioned it, Isaac, but
It's a
the Marlins
dagger
will
to the
look
heart.
so stupid if he does that.
I'm
There's
with you
no other
because
way
they
to say it.
acquired him for VR last year. It was like a great
Oh, and Bryson
trade.
Bergman's gonna go for sure. By the way,
Yeah, Brigham's for sure going to go. And they acquired Conine. He's Mr. Marlin's son. They acquired him for VR when the whole organization hated Jonathan VR. And just to leave him unprotected, just like that after 1 year where, he struck out at an astronomical rate, but he has power to, like you're talking about Jorge Soler having power to hit all over the ballpark. Griffin Conine can hit the ball all over the ballpark now. So I just thought that was a calculated risk, like you said, Peter, but an unnecessary one because Isan Diaz is the first one for me to get off the roster. But
You're
he's gonna
also
aim at least
Isaac.
5
You're
guys.
also talking about the same organization and the same ownership group that fired Conine himself from his advisory role when they got here. Right?
Griffin.
So, why? I guess if they're not big on the name, why would they care? Right? I mean,
But
obviously, the risk isn't in that. The risk is in the fact that there's so much room, as you guys have mentioned, Alfaro, Diaz. You can mention Campbell. There's so much room to be had. Brinson, yeah, there you go. I think Monte Harrison is still on the 40-man as well. So there's so much room that you can go to, right? It's not that you just want to try to DFA somebody to make room for somebody. And this is where they're going, right? They don't want to DFA somebody and risk losing a quality player for a guy that is still at least a year away. Griffin Conine, you have a 47% strikeout rate in AA baseball. It's not going to translate well, right? Plus, Pensacola is a very small field. Pullman Field, where he played in single A advanced in Beloit, is also a very small field. So not that Griffin doesn't have amazing 70-grade power, but those are small ballparks. Obviously, NL East is a different story. It's Major League Baseball. So obviously, they don't think he's Major League ready. I don't think any of us think that he's Major League ready. But like you said, some desperate team that has nothing to lose, why wouldn't they take that risk?
Right.
So with room on the 40-man and I think 5 clearable spots on the 40-man roster, right? Pete said 4, I say 5 at least, that you can waive a guy. They just did it with Brian Miller and he cleared. I think you can waive multiple guys, and if you really care about it, could clear, and then you could get Griffin on the roster and it wouldn't matter. So it's a stupid risk for a team like the Marlins that have so much 40-man flexibility to take. But, I mean, it could work out in their favor. I think it probably will. I really don't think he'll get claimed. But if he does, like I said, it's their own fault, and it's a very calculated risk.
And quickly with Conine, if they're not that big on the name, why did they choose him out of everyone in that farm system in Toronto? I mean, it was a player to be named later. Obviously, one knew who it was before it was actually announced. But I don't know. It just makes it's weird. They have to be this confident that Griffin Conine is not going to go in the Rule 5 draft for them to keep him unprotected over Isan Diaz, Jorge Alfaro, Paul Campbell, Lewis Brinson. I could probably get some other names if I really looked into that roster. And then you look at Bregman. Bregman may be a big mistake if the Marlins did this, And if he goes and he has success in the MLB, the Marlins made a mistake because, once again, over Isan Diaz, who was a horrible player this season for the Marlins, offensively, defensively, he actually impressed me a little bit. I'm not even gonna lie, but Bregman could have taken over Isan Diaz and could have made a lot of sense at third base and maybe even that bench player that the Marlins needed. Not the one that's gonna give him firepower or anything, but it's better than having Sandy Leon, Jorge Alfaro, and Isan Diaz.
Leon is
the big 3.
Yeah. Well,
one thing, Isaac, before we go, I want to ask Pete, because I've been begging to ask him this question. I've been campaigning for this guy in free agency, as you guys know. Michael Conforto. Pete, we know he's – I don't know if he's still on the shit list, but he was for a long time. So if he ever wore a Marlins jersey, what would be your
forever
segment?
will be.
Conforto is still on the shit list. He will remain on the shit list forever. Him and his elbow pad.
Thank you, Peter.
No chance. And it sounds like there's a big market for Conforto. So again, that kind of rules us out. So let's forget about him. He's a bum. Can't stand any of them Mets crew. Him, Nimmo, any of them. I don't want to see any of them in Miami. I want to cheer for guys I like.
Yeah.
So no to Conforto, please.
Yeah, and I actually asked a very specific MLB insider about that name today, actually, and he has heard no rumblings regarding Conforto in Miami. So I think you can pretty much eliminate that thought. One name that we didn't get to that maybe we'll get to next time is Clint Frazier. I want to ask Eli about that name. Does that make any sense in the Marlins plans? Because I know Frazier, he has offensive potential. He's shown he just can't really stay healthy. What do you think about that name?
I mean, as recently as last year. Last year is when he put up really big numbers in the COVID season, though, which you need to weigh a little. You need to be careful about how much weight to put onto that. I mean, with him, the big question is his health. And I guess to preface that, I mean, the reason why he's connected is coming from the Yankees and being a guy that has pretty obvious connections with a lot of members of this front office. I believe even James Rowson overlapped with him for a year in the minors. You could go down the list. Gary Denbo, I think, knows him pretty well, has probably played a role in acquiring him from a trade from Cleveland back in 2016. Right? Like there's a whole lot of connections there.
The hitting coach as well.
And at this point, because he cleared waivers, elected free agency, teams could have claimed him if they were willing to pay him his arbitration figure, which would have been like $2.5 million. Right now, his market value is lower than $2.5 million. And that speaks to just this very murky health situation with him, that they classified it as vertigo on the official MLB injury report in mid-August. And Clint came out and said that wasn't true, that it was something more private. And I guess he had permission to still not tell people what exactly was wrong, whether it's a physical injury or something more complex than that. So nobody knows if he's healthy, which is why he went unclaimed. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, he's a pretty obvious bounce back candidate. We're just drawn to, he is a beautiful looking swing, the bat speed that he creates and the exit velos that he produces. It's the kind of power that would play at any ballpark, but he's a low priority for the team. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were the team that has the best minor league deal to offer him. But anything beyond that, needs to go on the back burner. Right now, you got to focus on getting at least one real outfielder that you can count on. And then later in the offseason, he's depending on whether he's healthy or not, whether he's actually ready to play baseball, because it is a very unusual situation where it doesn't even seem like a baseball injury, pulled him out. Until you get more insight into that, hopefully the team has more details than I do, because I have no idea what's going on with him. And that's kind of why I couldn't even make a real recommendation as to whether he makes sense or not.
Yeah, I could see he's a name that I can see, going deep into almost a spring training time where he gets signed just, after all these big dominoes fall, like a Castellanos and, all the big time free agents. Unfortunately, that's where I see that happening. But I think, we're 3 minutes over. I think we're going to call it a show for now. Peter, thank you so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it. We're going to have you on a third time very soon, I hope. I hope you celebrated your birthday with a bunch of whiskeys because it looked delicious. Hopefully we'll see you soon again. For Kevin, for Noah, for Eli, for Alex, for Daniel, for myself, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Happy birthday to you.